5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to Two Cups Cafe, where I'm your host, Alan C. Jackson, and who I have coming through for a high-quality conversation today is none other than Chief Byrd. How you doing, Chief?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm honored that you would come by, man. I don't. This first time we meeting personally, but through the years, I've seen you, your name attached to a lot of great things in the city, and I just like to say once again, thanks for coming out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So let's take it back to the beginning, man. Like, how'd you grow? Like I said, we getting to know each other. Like, are you from Toledo? How'd you grow up? I know you was fire chief. Like, how did that transition from being a young person growing up, and then how'd you get into like those type of services?
I grew up in Toledo, born and raised here, 1200 block of Avondale.
Okay.
Yep. So shout out to everybody from the neighborhood over there.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to be a firefighter since I was about 4 or 5 years old. My mother used to, back then, families had one car.
Right.
My father
right.
took that to work. So when my mother did her grocery shopping, we go to the old A&P that was there on Detroit.
I remember AMP.
Yeah. So there was a number 16 fire station, which is on Dorr Street now. It used to be right there on Detroit. So she would walk me by that fire station. She'd walk out of the way with her little fold-out shopping cart
Yeah.
to go by the fire station because she knew I liked the trucks. And the guys would always be sitting out there playing games or whatever it was they were doing. And she'd let me talk to them. That kind of just sparked the interest. Never realizing that I would really end up on the job because, to be honest, back then there weren't a whole lot of them that looked like us.
Okay.
So it was something I wanted to do, but I never thought would actually, happen.
Right.
So fast forward, I'm in college, went away to Penn State to go to school for chemical engineering. Ended up coming back to Toledo because my father needed to retire because of some health issues. So I came back to Toledo, was going to UT. And the opportunity came up to take the fire test.
Yeah.
What's ironic about that is I was working and going to school, working 2 jobs, going to school, and a gentleman by the name of Glenn Frames,
Okay.
who worked at fire station number 6 over on Star Avenue.
East side.
On East Side.
Yeah.
Their crew would actually come to the video store I was working at part-time, and he would tell me about the job.
Okay.
And he kept inviting me to stop by the station. So I would do that. That man is why I ended up getting on the fire department.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, how many years ago was that?
Ooh, that would have been, I got hired in 88.
Okay.
So that would have probably been 86 and 87 because he would make constant contact with me.
Yeah. So did you did you go to Libby High School or?
Actually, my parents shipped me out to St. John's, which at the time, I felt like my father was doing a little social experiment on me. But it worked out. And as I got older, I told my father, I said, I felt like you kind of threw me to the wolves because he grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Okay.
Was in Korea was in the Air Force during the Korean War.
Okay.
And he would tell all these stories about the segregation and the things that he would see in Pine Bluff. And then he sent me to Trinity Lutheran on Glendale for 7th and 8th grade. I went to St. Philip's Lutheran before that, which was an all-black Lutheran school.
Okay.
But it only went up to 6th grade.
Okay.
So they sent me to Trinity and then to St. John's. And I told my father when I was about maybe 19, he's sitting in a chair reading his newspaper, like he always did. And I said, Daddy, I was mad at you. He said, why? I said, I felt like you threw me to the wolves.
Yeah.
He never stopped looking at his paper.
Yeah.
I said, he said, why? I said, you told me all those stories, and some of them were some pretty horrific stories.
Right.
Then I feel like you threw me out there. His only response to me was, I wanted you to learn how to play the game.
Yes, sir.
And I'm like, play the game? What is he talking about?
Right.
I got to be about 22, 23 years old, got on the fire department, and started seeing interactions between like some of the black firefighters and the white firefighters. Because back then it was still a little
Pretty
bit,
segregated.
yeah, sometimes a little tense, but getting better.
Okay.
And a light bulb clicked on in my head. It's like, I get what he's saying now.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't understand. Like, if you're familiar with our city, you know, because I had some viewers and listeners that, you know, from different areas where you grew up, it was primarily African American. I mean, the store owners, the neighbors, and everybody was, you know. And then you say you went to a predominantly, you know, European based education, and I know it had to be a culture shock.
Oh, the culture shock! Culture shock is an understatement. And but then the light bulb clicked on. It was like what he meant by playing the game was learning how to navigate more than just what I had been around.
Yes, sir.
And that was kind of a turning point for me, and not realizing at the time that it was a heck of a lesson from my father.
Yes, sir. So when you went away to Penn State, how was that college experience? So did the St. John's experience help you, like when you got on campus there? Like how was the campus there?
There, again, back in the 80s, there was still quite a bit of tension, and there were some actually some national news that was made for some things that had happened, and put it this way, it wasn't for good stuff.
Okay.
And when it came to race relations,
Yes, sir.
there, but you know, it was what it was. You just had to deal with it, and that was another lesson, you know, from my father and my uncles was sometimes you just got to figure out how to navigate.
So let me ask you, like, so you went away, you said for chemical engineering. So so when you came back home, was the goal still chemical engineering?
Yes, but as I met Glenn and just some other conversations with some other good family friends, that one of them was a firefighter, and it was like, okay, I've really always wanted to do this.
Yeah.
So I did it.
Yeah. So
and never looked back.
Yeah. So was education, because chemical engineering, like I don't really want to gloss past that. That's a big deal. You know
I was a math and science nerd. I still am.
Okay.
But I didn't, as much as I like that stuff and still do, it didn't give me a
wasn't your
purpose.
passion.
Yeah, it didn't give me a purpose, and I didn't have a passion for it.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I think I would have been totally miserable. Matter of fact, I had a National Merit Scholarship from Sun Oil. I don't know how long I would have lasted.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I just like to, because I know was education, like you say you was a math and a science nerd, was that something pushed by your family? Because I know we grew up in the Midwest. A lot of our big things at that time was manufacturing based, the Rust Belt, they call it now. But I mean, when I graduated high school, it was like, if I could just get me I did get one. I get me one of these Jeep jobs or Chrysler or back, you know, AMC or whatever at the time. You know, that's what you kind of just looked at 30 years and out. But like you said, the passion part was what kind of pushed me away from there, even though it was a good foundation to help start my family. I felt like I needed something different. So you said the fire department gave that for you. So how was the, I don't want to call it initiation, the recruitment process?
Recruitment back then, for me, I was recruited 99% by Mr. Glenn Frames.
Okay.
Yeah, and he passed away a few years ago. And as the chief, I actually got to speak at his funeral. And it was funny, I brought that up. And there were so many African-American firefighters at that funeral. As I'm saying that, they're nodding their heads because he was the same way with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So take me through the steps, you know, or your parts of your career that made you aspire even to attain like chief status department.
Honestly, that was never a goal. Was never a goal. It just kind of came about. All the promotional tests for me at that time, the first promotional test I took to lieutenant, because there were competitive processes.
Okay.
Honestly, the only reason I took it was because everybody in my station at the time was doing it.
Okay.
So I studied with them. My wife, that's a whole nother story. I could tell you how much my wife helped me with that, but that would be a half hour in itself.
Okay.
So that was the first promotion. It was happenstance. It was my environment. Everybody around me was studying, so I studied too. Ended up being promoted. Became a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
As a lieutenant, now you're the decision maker for your crew, for your rig.
Okay.
And we're going on these incidents. And the station that I was at the time got a whole lot of fires, but it didn't get a whole lot of EMS runs because at the time there wasn't much downtown.
Okay.
The station I was assigned to was at Washington and Ontario.
Washington.
Station
okay.
5.
I know what you're talking about.
And, back then there weren't a whole lot of businesses downtown. There definitely wasn't many residences downtown.
Yeah, downtown was
So,
not that lively.
but we got a lot of fires into adjacent districts that we
Okay.
responded to. So when I became a lieutenant, I was comfortable with the fires, but not so much with the EMS calls for service. So as a lieutenant, I went to paramedic school.
Okay.
So now I'm going to paramedic school on my days off and got that certification, nationally registered paramedic. And now I'm back in the study mode from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm kind of a book nerd too.
Okay. Yeah.
So captain's test comes about. I had just got done with paramedic school. So now it was study mode on steroids.
Okay.
So I took the captain's test, finished number 1 on the captain's test,
Wow.
got promoted, and I think I'm pretty sure I was the first African-American firefighter in the city of Toledo to finish number 1 on a promotional test. And then something similar happened for the next rank, which was battalion chief.
Okay.
And then and that was a competitive exam and assessment center process too.
Yeah.
After that, the deputy chief position was by appointment.
Okay.
So I got that. And from that position, I wasn't too crazy about some of the politics. So I actually self-demoted and went back to a battalion chief on the street.
Okay. Okay.
Because I have to believe in what I'm doing.
Right. I feel you.
So I gladly went back to the street. Was the happiest I had been in a long time. My blood pressure went down.
He said blood pressure went down.
Yes, it did. Matter of fact, I started getting sick, and I started getting sick because I had been on blood pressure medicine, and when I went back to the street, I didn't need it anymore.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my blood pressure has not been high ever since.
Yes, sir.
So, not knowing when I went back to the street as a battalion chief that it would end up turning into a request for me to be the chief of the department.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, then that came about, which I never aspired to that. Truly never did. I was happy with my district. I had all the downtown stations, the east side, and the old south end
Okay.
were all mine as a battalion
Yeah.
chief. So it was the busiest districts.
Okay.
Got to go to a bunch of fires, and the crews were fantastic, and I really loved that job.
Yes. Wow, that's interesting. I appreciate you giving me that journey because, if you're not familiar with how those departments are structured, like I didn't know how you went from, somebody working at a station to captain to battalion chief, and so I think that I thank you for that. So you said something interesting about paramedics. So you have the fire aspect of firefighting, but being in the fire department, but then you have the emergency services. And what did you see, like, because I know 05, East Side, Old South End, these are areas that, I don't want to say social economic limits, but we have a lot of people that, are trying to make it, you know what I mean? So some of your your medical services, I can see the fires, that's kind of, you want to put the fire out. But then when you get to dealing with people, it's almost like medical and social services. So what did you see?
It is.
What did you see as, in your experiences?
That a lot of people needed help and resources that they couldn't get. That was, again, the unfortunate social reality. And a lot of people would actually use that 911 system as their primary health care because they didn't have primary care physicians.
Yes.
And when you look at the history, especially in the minority communities, there's lack of trust when it comes to the health care.
Yes, sir.
And history has created that. Remember I talked about the conversations with my father? I mean, when you think about the Tuskegee experiments and all these other things that now, unfortunately, somebody's trying to erase from history, it created lack of trust in those minority communities for healthcare systems.
Yes, sir.
So the fire department, not just in Toledo, but even in other cities, we've kind of borne the brunt of that, especially departments that provide EMS services or emergency medical services.
Yes.
So that created another passion in me, which is one reason I started getting involved with the African American Male Wellness Agency.
Okay. So did you see a disparity in? Okay, so you have so in our communities we have age, uh, gender, ethnic background. So were you naturally able to see differences in different ages, genders, things of that nature?
Yes, I'll say like in the central city minority communities, and right now I'll talk about the African American communities compared to some of the more outlying districts. We would get more calls for non-emergent services because the people they didn't have the resources or didn't know what else to do other than to call 911.
Call somebody. Yeah.
So the number of diabetes calls, the number of calls for chronic respiratory stuff where people didn't have their insulin, they didn't have their medications, they didn't have their inhalers, they did So that was one reason I pushed to get us more involved in the African American Male Wellness Agency.
Right, because I think a lot of people think that that as African American men, we get involved in things that pertain to African American men only because we're African American, not realizing that there are actual social and economic barriers and attitudes, or like you said, natural distrust. Like somebody has to be there to bridge the gap, and a lot of times, as you probably seen, somebody that looks like you and can relate to you could be the one to help you over that hump.
Yes, yeah, and when it came to those calls for service and the amount of resources that it required from us, that affects the tax-paying base across the city. Everybody's paying into that.
Right.
So it didn't just make sense socially and because it was the right thing to do. It made sense economically, too, to try to curb some of those calls for service because they're strained on the system that everybody who pays taxes in the city is paying for.
Yeah, because you call 911 and all you guys show up.
Right.
That's an expensive call where you could have went to urgent care, got a
albuterol. You just called out a $500,000 rig.
Right.
With 4 people making decent money to come out because you've had a stomach ache for 3 days and you don't have a primary care doctor to go to.
Yes, sir. Wow. So what gave, because the idea, because you said you got involved in African American Wellness Initiative, and could you tell me a little bit about that?
It's the one that I got involved in actually originated in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
It was a group called National Center for Urban Solutions. They started it. The gentleman who founded it, his name is John Gregory. So myself and another firefighter, his name was Tony Haig, and his son and my wife went to Columbus, and when we saw what they were doing, we were just amazed because the number of health screenings that they were doing with instant results. It's like, man, we got to figure out how to do this in Toledo. Yeah. And Tony, he's like, Bryan, man, we got to figure this out because we need this in Toledo. The very next year we did it. We did it in 2013. Got a decent response. Like Columbus, they get 30,000 people at theirs, but it's Columbus.
Right.
We were pretty consistent with ours. We have maybe because we would do it on a Saturday morning in August. The third Saturday in August was typically when we did it.
Okay.
And our health screenings, the number of health screenings we provided, as far as individual screenings, I think Toledo probably did more individual screenings than even some of the bigger cities, with the exception of Columbus, obviously. Yes, we did PSA blood draws. I had the paramedics from Toledo Fire. Well, I was able to get a company called Physio Control at the time to donate for use at that event cardiac monitors where we would do 12 lead EKGs. We were the only one out of all the cities that did 12 lead EKGs. Now that's a couple $1,000 test in an emergency room.
Yes, sir.
We did it for free. And every year we found somebody who had some sort of anomaly with their heart that they were not aware of.
Wow.
Because part of the way that screening system works across all of the cities, it's not just, they take your blood pressure, your blood sugar, hey, your blood sugar's high, and they send you on your way.
Yes, sir.
No, that's not the way this one works.
Okay.
The way it works is you get a screening form, you hit all of the screenings. In order to get your T-shirt for the event, you got to sit down and talk to a doctor. So we had a table of doctors so that when you came out from your last screening, you had your printout of your EKG, you had some of your other results, and you literally had to sit down and talk to a doctor. Now, the doctors then knew who they could refer people to right there at the event. We had pharmaceutical counseling there. We had social service folks there. We had some of everybody. Yeah. So if the doctor saw something, the doctor could say, hey, you need to go over to that table and they can help you out with your prescription or something like that. Yeah. And the doctor had to sign their form. And the only way they could get their T-shirt for the event was to take their signed form to a table where they could then get their T-shirt. Wow. So if they didn't have any other doctor's appointments that year, they had one.
I heard that.
Right. And there were some people who ended up being referred to and got some primary care docs out of that. So it's not just your regular health fair.
Yes, sir. I bet you guys got some testimonies afterwards, like people didn't know that they were dealing with that, Because I know, to be honest, it's like, I want to say this, as an African-American man or a black man, it's like we get used to a certain threshold of irritation. Or a certain
threshold of irritation.
So because I remember I used to, I worked at a factory, like I was telling you. So, and then one time we were off for like a month, and I woke up in the morning and I thought something was wrong, but then I noticed like my hands weren't hurting, and my back wasn't hurting, and then I was like, this is how I'm supposed to feel. But then when you're in pain, you only can focus on what's in front of you. You got to do what you got to do. I got to make it through this day. I got to make it, to work. I got to pick my kids up. And you just get used to that constant, like, it's almost like a buzz. It's like you're hearing if in a bad microphone, you hear the hum in it. But after a while, you don't hear the hum no more because you don't know how to fix it. Right. So you just get used to dealing with it. Yeah. And that's what I think as men, we get used to that noise level, and then we just adjust to it. But then when we could bring the noise, that's why people say you got to calm the noise. When you calm that down, whether it's in your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, then you can start, thinking about other things. Yeah. So I know you guys, man, had to have a lot of testimonies. Like, I didn't know I was not even supposed to feel like that.
Right. So almost every year, if not every year, we had somebody transported to the hospital from our event. And the screenings weren't just for the men too. We did women. A couple years we even did a few things with kids with some vaccines and stuff. Okay. But every year we transported somebody to the hospital. Yeah. The first year we did it, there was a lady who her EKG was showing that she was actually in the process of having a heart attack. Wow. She got transported over to St. V's and ended up getting a heart cath. Wow. That's an African-American female at the African-American male wellness event. Right. Right. And numerous people with the prostate, the PSA is elevated. People
could you explain about the PSA? I'm not.
That's a blood test they do that determines whether or not is it prostate-specific antigen? I can't remember exactly what PSA stands for, but that is the blood test that they do to determine whether or not there's something bad going on with your prostate. Okay. Now, sometimes it can be elevated just because of an enlarged prostate, but it's benign, and there's some procedures that they can go and do and like shave off part of the Okay. But it could also be elevated because you have prostate cancer.
Yes, sir. So prostates in our community, we hear a lot about, prostates and then colon, things like that. Like, what is the major driver of needing to get that checked?
Specifically, in the African-American community, black men are dying from prostate cancer at disparate rates. Now, we talk about history and ideas of what masculinity are, that can be an issue with us too.
Yes, sir.
Because one of the tests for prostate cancer is the digital rectal exam.
Yes, sir.
And to put it bluntly, somebody's going to be putting their finger up your rear end.
Yeah, I had to get my
Yep.
oil checked before. It wasn't,
And got your oil checked. Yep. And there's a lot of us who don't want that done.
Yeah.
I have family members who have said to me,
Not doing
"No,
it.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. They can do the blood test. I'm good." Well, in my particular case, it was a routine doctor's appointment that I had blood drawn, and a couple days later, I got a call to make an appointment to see the doctor, and I asked why, and they said some abnormal lab values. That abnormal lab value was my PSA. Now, mind you, I would probably get my PSA drawn at least once a year, sometimes multiple times, because when I was traveling around to these different cities for the African American male wellness thing.
Had to participate.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm part of organizing all this stuff, I have to show participation. Yes, so there were some summers where I probably had my blood drawn for PSA 3 or 4 times, but never came back high.
Yes, sir.
And when this happened after my routine doctor's appointment, my PSA before that, which was earlier in the year, was like 2.3.
Okay.
It ended up 9.8. So it's like, okay, that's cause for concern.
Yes, sir.
Doctor did the digital rectal exam. He said he felt some enlargement, but he's a family care doc.
Right.
He's not a specialist.
Right.
So he then referred me to a specialist because he said he could feel an enlargement, but he doesn't know whether it's benign or what.
Right.
So
he's kind of like AutoZone, where they can hook the meter up to the machine, but tell you something's going on.
Yeah, but you don't know what that something is.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay.
So he referred me to a urological oncologist over at UTMC.
Okay.
Who happened to be, I think his title was like the chief urological oncologist for UTMC.
Okay.
He's a pretty well-known doctor, and I didn't know who he was from Adam at the time.
Right.
So he does the digital rectal exam, and he was very specific in his description.
Okay.
He said that he could feel a large, hard nodule on a certain side of my prostate.
Okay.
So he repeated blood work again, ordered an MRI. The MRI came back with not just one tumor on my prostate, but 2. Now, mind you, I had been totally asymptomatic.
Right.
Because a lot of people, when they start having those issues, they're getting up and going to the bathroom 4 or 5 times a night.
Okay.
They have other issues related to it. I had none. I did mention to the doctor, my primary care doc, that every now and then I get up once during the night to go urinate. But at the time, I was drinking a ton of water, Gatorade. Me and my wife were working out real hard. So getting up once every now and then was not something unusual considering all the other factors. So he got the MRI, and both these spots lit up like light bulbs.
Yeah.
So then he had to order a biopsy.
Okay.
And this is what I tell people. When we talk about early detection and why it's important to get these routine exams.
Yes, sir.
Our healthcare system has delays built into it.
You mean delays like?
Delays from one doc to the next if you get referred, then testing processes. And we won't even talk about the insurance companies, but I'll tell you my story. All these things that the doctor had found up until this point, including the MRI that showed these tumors, the insurance company denied the biopsy and said it wasn't medically necessary.
Wow.
So when I tell people to make sure you get a good primary care doc,
yes, sir,
get one that's going to advocate for you. Because my doctor did. Both the primary care doc and my surgeon, they were pushy and aggressive with the treatments, and the surgeon ended up and that letter, by the way, about the denial of the biopsy came to the house the day before my biopsy was supposed to happen. Doctor called him. That got squashed. I still got my biopsy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Blessed.
And the biopsy showed that I had what they called an advanced and aggressive prostate cancer. From being asymptomatic,
just a boom,
and not back in October when when the routine doctor's appointment happened, to February. So there's delay, right? So October 1st appointment, didn't get the surgery until February 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And all those little things that happened in between with scheduling an appointment, scheduling the machine, because I guess there's a certain machine that they have to do the biopsy, that there's only a few of them in the area.
Wow.
Then the potential delay created by a health insurance company denying a procedure.
Mm-hmm.
The built-in delays do not help, because say you do have an aggressive cancer and now you're months into it and you haven't had any real treatment for it, the likelihood of it metastasizing somewhere else in your body
Yes.
increases. So if you don't detect it early in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
you're behind the 8 ball.
Wow.
So if you detect it early, go to your routine doctor's appointments, get that necessary test done along with the blood work, and put your perceived idea of masculinity to the side.
Yes, sir.
And think about your health and your family that need you around them.
That's powerful, man. Just understanding that process. I know I have a friend of mine. He's a life insurance agent.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get older, or people in different areas of the timeline in their life, like he's very good about advocating for African American men to get life insurance.
Yes.
Get life insurance. But he said it's sad sometimes for him, because you have to get your blood work done to get life insurance, and you have to tell his client or potential client, like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you need to see a doctor. And a lot of times, you'll get denied life insurance right off the bat.
Or your premiums are through the roof.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you can't get certain life insurance or certain things you get denied for. Just, because your blood work is off.
Yep.
And now you put in the position, now you go to the doctor and you faced with some diagnosis or some prognosis that you try to put things in order for your family. So that's powerful, man.
It's the system could use some improvements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I was blessed in that I had the surgery and the doctor thinks he got it all out.
Yes, sir.
I won't find that out now until June. So there's again, a hurry up and wait game.
There's another process.
Right.
Wait game.
So I'll find that out in June. But so far so good. But I just tell people, don't take your health for granted.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how good you feel, still go to your routine doctors. First of all, get a primary care doctor if you don't have one.
Yes, sir.
And regularly schedule your appointments to have the basic stuff checked, because you never know. I was probably in the second best health I've been in my life, going back to like my 20s, because me and my wife were working out all the time.
Yeah.
And we would put 20-pound backpacks on our back and do 3-mile walks through the neighborhood a couple times a week, in addition to going to the gym almost every day.
Right.
So, and then to find that out, it was a kick. It was a kick in the butt. No pun intended.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you, so what do they say that causes prostate cancer? Is that just something that just happens, like just from your body?
There are unexplained cases.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a gene that people inherit.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I had a genetic test done.
Okay.
And the genetic test showed that I inherited no prostate cancer gene from anybody, but I ended up with prostate cancer.
Right.
So then the only logical step or logical source for me probably would have been the job.
Okay.
Because firefighters get, I forget, how many more times likely they are to get various forms of cancer just by what they're exposed to.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there's called a cancer presumption law for firefighters, meaning that if you get cancer, there's going to be a presumption that you got it because of the job.
Wow. Ooh,
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yep. And it's funny, the day I graduated from the academy, we're in Government Center, one of the training lieutenants, he was not known for mixing his words. He said in front of our families that were all there after we got sworn in, "Congratulations, you just probably shortened your lifespan by 10 years.
Oh, man.
And the first thing I did was try and look at my mother, and she's looking at me like, really?
It's what you want to do?
You're right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yep. And when I got hired, the firefighters weren't fully encapsulated like they are now.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Meaning like the bunker pants. We had high rubber boots that came up to the thigh, a long coat, but the only protection you had between your lower parts and whatever was in that smoke and that heat was a pair of polyester pants. That was it.
Oh, man.
And now they found out that even some of the fire gear,
leached off into you.
well, yet some of the fire gear has components that are carcinogenic. So now not only are you in the environment with the smoke and the heat and whatever's burning you, that's going into you.
Yeah.
Now you find out that the gear that you put on to protect yourself from it
can cause something.
Yes.
Wow. Man, that's a lot to think about.
It's a lot.
When you try and get new recruits, huh?
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
man.
And most I think most that take jobs like that or any public safety jobs, they know the danger they're getting
for sure.
into, and it's an unfortunate potential consequence of the work.
Yes, sir.
I couldn't be a cop because,
yeah,
hopefully the fire I could get out of. You can't run away from a bullet.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. And
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Our buddy over there. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir. So you guys work together on tell me about some things like, so I know you did the initiative with the African American Wellness, but what kind of things did you do, like as chief, like in the city? Like I know you had to work cross sectors and work with police or working with the mayor or city government. Like what type of things you had to do with that?
It was different for me because, again, I'm not good at politics.
Okay.
And sometimes my mouth would not work in my favor.
Okay.
But that's okay because sometimes that's necessary. One of the biggest, it's a social yet a political thing.
Okay.
Was with recruiting for the department because the percentage of minorities on the department was low, especially when it came to African American women. So we literally changed the recruiting process.
Okay.
I'll give you an example of what it used to look like.
Okay.
The recruiting process, especially, and some of this was court ordered because back in the 80s, they were ordered to do some of this because of the lack of diversity in the department, which is kind of frustrating with what some of the things that are going on today in the world.
Yeah, because people think certain things aren't needed anymore.
Right. So, but they forget the origins of why those things came about. So what they used to do, especially when it came to recruiting, you'd go out, you'd talk to people, you present to groups, and they would get an interest card to fill out, and then because nothing was computerized back then. They fill out an interest card, they have to put their contact information on there, and then the city would contact them with the different steps of the job.
Okay.
Well, communities back then, even in the 80s, were more segregated than they are now in Toledo. That's the reality.
Sure.
So their idea of recruiting in a minority community was to pass out these interest cards, and sometimes the locations that they would pick to want us to do that, I would go, wait a minute, what? Not assuming that somebody can't do it, but when you're passing out these interest cards, specifically in a community where people are economically and socially and resource challenged, what's the likelihood that they're going to follow through with filling out this card and then following up with the process? Because when you think about that, who's more likely to have changes in telephone numbers?
Right.
Who's more likely to have changes in addresses?
Yes, sir.
It's those communities that are impacted economically and socially.
That's 100%.
Right.
Yeah, because I went to Scott High School, but the school didn't have because we had landlines back then.
Right.
And we didn't have one. So
Right.
the school didn't have a phone contact or a valid address for me my 2 years that I went to Scott before I graduated. And I admit, I thought that was cool back then because my mom wasn't gonna get none of the notifications that I was skipping class. And, she didn't get she didn't know when I got suspended. She didn't know nothing.
Yeah.
But I see what you said. Like if you don't have that adequate follow up or the ability to even track the interest, then what do?
Yep. And I was involved with recruiting from the time I was a captain. They would pull you off what's called the line when you're out in the station to do recruiting, but they would only do recruiting, I think it was like 90 days or something like that before a test.
Okay. Oh. So it had
So
much
now there's
lenient
another
time.
limiting
Yeah,
factor. And then when the test results would end up as they were, and there were very few minorities on the list, I would say something. There was a director of HR who I went to, and I said, this,
don't look right.
well, I said, this is the end result. And that person said to me, well, they filled out the interest card, so why didn't they come take the test? That was the response. I'm like, this system is flawed.
Like where was
Flawed
the
at
barriers?
best.
Yeah.
So it was not designed to be effective with recruiting minorities.
Okay.
It just wasn't. And that was a hard pill for some folks to swallow. But again, I never pulled punches on that when I would have conversations with whoever I could have conversations with about it, because it was fact.
Yeah.
And then the ones who would show up often couldn't pass the test.
Okay. Yeah,
because of some of the challenges that we talked about.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault. That's the situation that they're in.
Yeah.
But if your idea of recruiting for minorities is focusing on this, you got to supplement that with something that really gives them a fair opportunity to be successful in the process.
At least be able to learn what's going to be
Right.
encapsulated in the test.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I became the chief, I knew it was going to ruffle some feathers. We completely revamped the recruiting process.
Okay.
I created a year-round recruiting team, but we called it community engagement,
Okay. I got you.
because their mere presence is a recruiting tool.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go, and they didn't pick just minority communities. It was not isolated to any ethnic or social group in the city. It was across the board.
Yeah.
So we recruited across the board,
Okay.
but we recruited across the board in ways that would bring people into the process who could be successful in
Yeah.
it.
So it was relevant to the people you're
Yes,
recruiting. Yeah.
right, across the board.
Across the board.
So the first test that happened after that, the number of minorities on that eligibility list skyrocketed because we recruited across the board. Weren't picking specific groups.
Right.
We just leveled the playing field with how we recruited, with people who had to have the ability to be successful in the process. Because one of the things that, they do extensive background checks. So who's disparately affected by the number of speeding tickets and all that, which gave you negative points on the background test, which could eliminate you from the process. So again, all these social factors contribute to the lack of minorities in that line of work. But nobody wanted to talk about those disparities and how they impact the end result with the testing.
Right.
So the guy who I put over that process was just fantastic with that. And I told him, just go do what you do.
Right. Right.
And that's what they did. So they were going to college campuses. They were going wherever there was any group of people, no matter what they looked like, no matter what their gender, that we thought could get through the process. That's who they recruited. It resulted in the most diverse, non-court ordered eligibility list we ever had on Toledo Fire.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah.
There was backlash from that. I got calls and even some lightweight threats from people who thought that their relative or whoever should have been hired. And it was, you need to have a conversation with them. Don't blame that on me.
Right.
Because there was a lot of nepotism and fire and police jobs. There is.
Yeah, that was the way it went. Fire, police, factory, anywhere somebody had a
relative.
Yeah, relative, yeah.
And there were a couple people who, I mean, they did not hide the fact that they were quite unhappy that their relative, whether it be son, nephew, cousin, whatever, next door neighbor, didn't get hired. When the class ended up being the most diverse non-court ordered class that came off that list. But when you looked at the list, it's like, these are the people who passed the test. You're upset because your relative didn't pass the test when didn't get hired, but everybody who got hired
passed the test
is above your relative on the list.
Right. They thought it was a
Entitlement.
yeah. Hmm.
So that didn't go over so well either, but it is what it is.
Yes, sir.
So just trying to do, they said that there were a lot of things that became a passion of mine.
Yes.
One was the health, because of health disparities. One
Mhm.
of it was the recruiting, because of disparities in the department not looking like the community that it serves.
Yes, sir.
And that was some drivers for me with getting some of the things done that we did.
Okay. So you recently retired, though, right?
I retired from fire in December of 21.
Okay, December of 21.
Mhm.
So this is a Two Cups Cafe. It's a analogy for life, which is the first cup. I wake up. It's a meditation process of what I'm grateful for, what I'm thankful for, what I'm dreaming about, what I'm visioning about, what I'm just blue skying. And then by the time I get to that second cup, it's time for the work. Like, what steps am I taking to, you know, whether it's reading a book or getting an education, whether it's, having coffee with somebody, whether it's just, praying about something. Like, what is that next step towards the work to get to that finished product? And I know you're retired and you've been going through some health things, and I pray that by the time you get to your next appointment, everything's in order. But like, what's waking you up now? What's motivating you? What you're looking forward to?
Right now, personally, the health stuff and my wife being able to do the things that we talked about doing. We've been together
sir.
for 41 years.
Oh man,
And,
it's a blessing.
We kind of had a goal for things we wanted to do, a lot of traveling. And we
Yes,
got to
sir.
do some of that, and
Okay.
we're going to be doing some more. There was a piece in between fire and final retirement, though.
Okay.
That was, I got to work with the gentleman sitting over here.
Yeah.
Out of the mayor's office as the safety director
Okay.
and the deputy safety director. And the limited amount of time that we had, I think we got a lot of stuff accomplished.
Yes, sir.
And, proud of that. And I think if we had been given the leeway to do some more, it could have been even more successful.
Yes, sir.
But, we talk about politics as politics.
Yes, sir.
Yep. But right now, I just want to make sure I'm healthy to be able to spend the time with my grandkids and my wife and friends and family. And that is truly my motivating factor now, because
Yeah.
that scared me.
Yeah, I bet.
It scared me.
Yes,
And
sir.
I belong to several prostate cancer support groups.
Okay.
And just today, this morning, I was going through one of them, and I counted 4 people who were saying that somebody had just died from prostate cancer,
Wow. Wow.
because all of them found out
Late
late.
detection. Late detection.
Yep.
So I really pray that we could chop this up and use different clips to really get people to understand the importance of, like you said, of early detection. And that's coming, I got to be a first partaker because, I don't like the doctor. I don't like, and I don't even know some things people think that are inherent. It gets passed down, like that
Yeah.
trust. Like you have to like consciously make an effort, constantly make a change. And I spoke with a guest of mine earlier, and he was going through. He wasn't prostate cancer, but it was a different cancer, and that just hits home, like that message about health, like all men, women, whoever need to just really take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And I know, like for me, like so I have like differences because I do like self contract work and things of that nature. So navigating insurance and all that stuff a lot of times is real. It's an irritation,
Yes.
and I don't like to, you call people, you gotta be on hold for a while, or they want so much of your background, and they want you to remember like when the last time you had this, when the last time you had that. Like, man, I don't know. I just
Right.
trying to get an appointment, but maybe we have to be more resilient because it's not just random. Your life could be on
Right.
the line, so.
Yep. And especially with the prostate cancer and the perception of masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
because again, the digital rectal exam
Yes,
is
sir.
going to happen. And I said, I have family members who say they would never have it done. And this is what I tell them. And this Sounds like kind of a harsh thing to say, but it's reality. That 30-second digital rectal exam
Mm-hmm.
that could result in you being or having early detection
Mm-hmm.
versus waiting
Yes, sir.
and not doing it. One of the side effects of prostate cancer, if you get the surgery to get your prostate removed,
Mm-hmm.
two things is going to happen. Two things are going to happen. This is fact. You are going to be incontinent, meaning you're not going to have any control over your urine flow,
Mm.
and you're going to be impotent
Mm.
unless they can spare some nerves.
Right.
They're more likely to be able to spare nerves with that prostatectomy if it's detected early. I was lucky where they were able to do some nerve sparing for mine.
Yes, sir.
But it's still no guarantees.
Right.
But it's much more likely for things to return to normal.
Mm-hmm.
So you're worried about that 30-second finger up your rear end.
Mm-hmm. Might be game
You better
over.
be thinking about what's going to happen down the road if you
Yes,
don't
sir.
get that right.
Yes,
And if
sir.
your masculinity is tied to that
Mm-hmm.
30-second finger up your rear end,
Mm-hmm.
then it's likely you're going to tie your masculinity to your ability to not perform.
Yes, sir.
So that's fact.
Mm.
So you can't have it both ways.
Nah, you can't.
You can't have it both ways. And the best way to avoid it all is go to the doctor and make sure that the doctor's advocating for you to get the help that you need, especially if it comes down to something like this, because
sir.
black men are dying from prostate cancer more than anybody else.
Man, I really appreciate your transparency, man, and how you taking the time and just sharing your experience, sharing your life. I mean, you've done so much. I just commend you for being married and being a family man, and man, I mean, we want to talk about African American or black men. We got you broken a lot of
Yeah.
stereotypes, a lot of
Mhm.
statistical barriers, a lot of things that you've done in your life that we need role models. We need somebody to say, no, he did it. We could do it.
Yeah.
It's just not on TV. You know what I'm saying? So I just appreciate your transparency, man, and your journey. And I know those things that you and your wife, aspire to do, man. I'm believing with you that you're gonna get them done. You're gonna see more things and experience more things, and all that life encapsulates for you, man.
Yeah, that's the goal. That is the goal. And then, as I said, along the way, good support. And, there's friends and there's family, and there's friends who sometimes can be more family than family.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And I've been blessed to be surrounded by a good group of folks
Okay.
with a lot of support.
And if anything on your heart, at any time, man, I'll make my stuff available. I don't have to be on it. If you want to put a message out, or you want to speak to some people and record some things, or get some thoughts out, because you've got a vast area of knowledge and expertise. You've seen a lot. You've been through a lot. I mean, just from city government to regional stuff. I mean, you've been all through different cities about the fire. If anything I can do to help, or I know my brother, he get a hold of me. So whatever,
Okay.
I'll make myself available any way I can.
I appreciate that. And ditto.
Yes, sir.
Seriously.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that.
All right.
Well, this has been Two Cups Cafe, man. This has been a great conversation. Like, subscribe, share it with somebody. Listen and take heed to what's been going on. We got to stay healthy. We got to be here for our friends, our families, and just don't let our legacy be cut short, because all of us have big things to do. Until next time, like I said, like, subscribe, share. We'll be coming to you again, Two Cups.